Greetings, everyone. My name is Kate Rademacher, and we're here with Writing for Your Life, the second Tuesday discussion group. It's really wonderful to be back together. And I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, whose name is Kate Kennedy. And this is a very special day for Kate because today, I don't think this has ever happened before, is her actual book launch day. Her book was released today, and this is the title, Once Upon a School, and I know she's going to be telling us more about it. But so congratulations to Kate Kennedy, and thank you for being here on such a big day. It's an honor, and I'm just going to read a little bit about Kate, and then we're going to get started with our session. So Kate Kennedy describes herself as a mom, a wife, a sister, a daughter, a visionary, and a dreamer of big dreams. She began her professional career as a writer and producer for Turner Network Television, and before she transitioned her career to service and ministry. She has a master's of religion and public life from Emory University, and she's currently pursuing a doctor of ministry at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, with a focus on creative writing and public theology. How fun. The one of the main things we're going to be talking about today is that in 2018, Kate founded and led a tuition-free private school for children experiencing homelessness in Atlanta. They began with 9 young scholars and now serve over 60. The journey of making this change-making organization and heart-wrenching decision to leave led to her debut book, Once Upon a School, a story of dreaming big, falling hard, and bouncing back. So welcome, Kate, and again,
Thank you.
congratulations on the launch of your book. Kate's going to be
Thank you.
speaking today on the topic of writing trauma that heals. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and I'll hand it over to you, Kate, and just let me know when you are ready for me to share the slides for you.
Okay. So hi everybody. I'm so glad to be here, and my book release has been on the calendar for a while as today, and then Kate asked me to speak tonight, and I was like, well, that works great because that's the day my book releases. So it was a complete coincidence, or divine providence or something, but I'm glad to be able to share the day with you all. This book has really been a labor of love for me because, as Kate said, I opened a school and I started working on it in 2015. We opened our school and our doors in 2018, and it was for children who were without housing on the streets of Atlanta. And I just wanted to provide a top-notch educational opportunity for them, that they could afford, that made it easy, that dealt with all of the issues that a child without housing has to deal with when they're trying to navigate, and their parents, when they're trying to navigate getting an education. I mean, the numbers, I won't bore you with all the numbers, but they're just staggering. And the work was hard, and it was amazing and wonderful. And in 2020, the end of 2021, I walked away from the school in a decision that was mine, but was not mine. And I won't go into all the details because you can read the book and find them out. But the result of that is that I separated myself from something that had truly become a part of me. And through that, I experienced a significant amount of trauma and grief and loss. During that time, I lost both of my parents very tragically and unexpectedly. And so it was a really hard time for me. So I actually began writing this book as a way to kind of process what I was feeling, because I didn't even have words to express like the deep, deep hole that I had in me. And so one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I had 60,000 words, and I was like, wow, I had a lot to say. And I found it tremendously difficult, but tremendously healing. It gave me the words that I needed to share my story, even if even if it only serves my own healing. To have the words to share my story was really meaningful to me. So I've put together kind of some thoughts on really the mechanics of how I now look at the process of writing trauma. And it's hard to call it a process because it is such an emotional, personal thing. But for me, that's a very a very clear-cut way to kind of go through steps, and I find that very healing. So I wanted to share some of those with you all. So Kate, we can put the slides up. Um, So, writing, especially when you are a writer like we are, and you can find the way to use a language, your language, to express your innermost feelings. I think that's one of those. I learned that from Toni Morrison. One of the most amazing things is that we can use language as writers to dive into a different place. And I think that's why we are writers, because of the way we use language. But I think that the most important thing is that writing trauma is not for the general public. Writing trauma is first and foremost a very personal journey. And I think it's a gift that we have as writers to really have a channel for healing for ourselves. So one thing that I want to say, and I don't plan for us tonight to get into any kind of personal individual traumas, because that's not really what we're here for, to be a therapy session or a support group. We're really here to talk about how we get this, how we process this through the art of writing. So, but just sometimes thinking about this can tweak some emotions and trigger some things. And so I just want you to know that the most important thing is for you to take away from here is how important it is for you to take care of yourself and to protect yourself and to honor and listen to your body and your emotions, and to really find your own safe spaces, and protect those for yourselves. So if at any time you're feeling like, "Oh, this is really bringing up something for me," feel free to take a deep breath, turn your camera off, whatever. This is a place that I want everybody to feel safe, although hopefully we won't get there tonight. So can we do the next slide? The first thing we need to define is, what is trauma? So trauma is a really big word. And when you look it up, there's a broad array of ways to describe something that is almost in many ways undescribable. So next slide, please. If you look it up in just a dictionary, Webster's, or the definition across the board in just general dictionaries is that trauma is an event or an injury. The medical community calls it a physical wound to your skin, a trauma to the head. But the next slide. When we look in the journals, the professional journals of psychiatry and psychology, of counseling, their scientific and professional definitions is not that it's an event or an injury, but rather it's an emotional response. So I think that's really important for us to remember. You can suffer trauma in many different ways. You can be affected in many different ways, but the event that leads you to the emotional response can be different for all of us. It can be something individual, something that you can remove yourself from. And even though that doesn't mean that your emotional response immediately is removed from you, it's always something you have to work through. It does mean that you can begin the healing process. But then in our world, we have a significant amount of institutional trauma, and community trauma that you can't remove yourself from. It is just continually triggering you and triggering you. And so what we want to focus on in those cases is, what is the emotional response, and how can we best honor that response and what it does to us as a person. So that brings me to this really amazing word that I learned when I was researching my book. And I know I talked about this a little bit. We're not alone in our love of words as writers. I love words. I love language. I just think it's magical what we can do with it. So the next slide, Kate. There's this word is sonder. And I don't know if any of you all are familiar with it. It was actually created by a man named John Koenig in 2012. He wrote a book called The Dictionary of Obscure Terms, and it is words that had not been invented to express emotions that he was seeing in the community. And so he made up a bunch of words and he wrote a book, and they're amazing words, all of them. If you've not read the book, I would highly recommend it. But Sonder is the profound feeling of realizing that everyone, including strangers passing by in the street, has a life as complex as one's own, which they are constantly living, and that each of us is a bit player in their story. I just think that's so beautiful because it shows that all of our stories mesh and weave and intermingle together. And even though we all have different experiences and we all have different events in our life, um, when we share those, we can enter into a space where we can find the one common truth. Because our traumas can be different, but the emotional response in many ways, um, we can find connection there. And so that's a really important thing for us as writers to remember. This trauma is hard and it's lonely, but it is universal. And that feeling is universal. I know no one who doesn't feel, some more than others, but who does not have an emotional feeling about, terrible, painful things that have happened to them. And through this process of revealing the communal truth, we can help everybody know that we're never alone, that we're all together. And so that's why I really argue that we shouldn't identify trauma as an event, but rather as an emotional response. Because two people from different parts of the world and different walks of life and completely different circumstances can experience different events, and yet in many ways the emotions can be very, very similar. So next slide. So how do we go about sharing our trauma? Um, it's a gift that we have as writers, and sometimes it's in some ways we can look at it as a responsibility of us as a writer, because we're just so uniquely equipped to be able to use language to and metaphor and example to get to a deeper meaning for a surface situation. And it's so very powerful and so very healing. And as we write, our styles are so different as the people who are in the world, who are reading, who are suffering, who need guidance, who are looking for truth and commonality. And so by coming together and sharing these stories in the way that we can, it can begin to heal so many. I'm actually taking a class right now for my doctorate. It's called Bearing Witness to Our Trauma. And we've been dealing a lot with writing trauma, and we've been writing a lot of our own trauma, but our final assignment for the class is to interview somebody and write their trauma. And I'm finding that very interesting and helpful, and just eye-opening to switch that around and look at it from a different perspective. So I think that this is something that we really should continue to think about as we continue in our craft of writing. So next slide. I put together some really simple steps and I don't mean to simplify this too much, but I find sometimes if I can simplify it, it breaks things into different chunks that seem more manageable to me. So I think what I've learned about writing trauma is the very first step is when you want to get something out on paper, when you want to process something, write the story you want to write, not the story you want to publish, not the story that you want your neighbor to read, not the story that you want to share with your children or with your church or whatever. Write the story you want to write, and don't leave anything out. Just write it, let it be. And sometimes that's a super hard thing to do, but I find that starting with that is just the best place to start. Next slide. There's a beautiful quote by Maya Angelou, which actually opens my book. There is no agony greater than bearing an untold story inside of you. And I think that is just so absolutely true. I mean, I found when I started writing my story of building the school and of leaving the school that I didn't even have words for it. And yet it came. And the processing that allowed me to do was absolutely miraculous in many ways. And the first few drafts of it would never have made it out in public for lots of different reasons. I think because first I didn't write my story. I tried to whitewash it and make it look a lot I was just scared to say what really was happening. And then I wrote too much. And wow, that was too much. So you have to find that middle ground, but you really have to start by putting it all out there just for yourself. So next slide. I think that the second thing, and this is really important, is to identify your unique entry point. Um, this comes back to Sonder. We're all living lives, and we're all passing each other by, and we're all crossing each other. And we're going to get to that same truth. So often it is the one kernel of truth that lives within each of us, but we all get there in our unique way, and we all enter through a unique place. I will say one of my partners in my class that I'm taking, I was telling her a story of the story of the school and the trauma that it had caused me, and she said to me, "I feel like you're telling my coming out story," and that I would never have put those two things together. But she said when she came out to her family, and she came out to her friends as homosexual, that's what she felt like, that she had never been really seen before. She had never been heard, that she had never been able to live out the person that she believed herself to be. And all of a sudden, as I'm telling my story of feeling like I was supposed to be something that I was not, and nobody really understood she saw a commonality there. And through that, she was able to process some stuff that I really never could have come at if I had tried to tell her story. I had to come at it through my point, but we got to the same place. So I think that's a really important thing. Next slide. And this is just a beautiful thing. Truth is the torch that gleams through the fog without dispelling it. So our lives, our stories, sometimes they can be like the fog, and they all have that beautiful light within them that we all hold in common. And so when we enter through our own foggy spaces, then we can come out and identify the light that really kind of shines in all of us. Next slide. So I talked about this a little bit already, but it's important to write your whole story. And then if you decide that you want to share it on a broader range publicly, then it's important to let others read it. And it's important to allow them to help you to either walk it back or walk it forward. And like I mentioned before, I finished my first draft of the book. I was so excited, and I turned it over to several people that I knew, some that knew the situation, some that didn't, and I asked them to read it. And every single one of them said, "You got to say more. You're not telling the story. That you're not telling the story." So I went back and I started writing again. And I mean, I really told the story. And I handed it out to those people and more people and asked them to read it. And people would come back and they'd say, "You know what? That word that you use right now, that could really trigger somebody. Why don't you try a different word?" Which I had never thought. Or this story, maybe you shouldn't tell that story with these details. And I even, there's one family that went to the school, and I think I shared this in my interview with Kate, who about the book, who is they've been without housing for such a long time, and their story is so detailed and so sad, but so specific to them. But I wanted to share their story in the book, and I didn't use their names. But even though I hadn't used their names, I wanted to go back and I wanted to help them. I mean, I wanted to give them the permit, get their permission to tell the story even without their names. And when I finished it, they said to me, "Will you use our names? Because nobody has ever told our story before. And hearing your words around our story is really helping us to understand better." This is from a privileged white woman trying to tell the story of a generationally unhoused Black family. And so just that we were able to find that connection was so healing and growing for both of us. Next slide. Then remembering the good stuff is important. When I got to the end of my book, I was so depressed because I had written so much. I had really had to dive back into all of the painful parts and all of the painful memories. And by the time I got to the end, I was so kind of triggered that I couldn't. I ended it on a really really down note. Like, well, it was very Eeyore-ish at the end. And uh, my editor said to me, but look at all the things you've done since then. I mean, you've written a book, you've started seminary, you've done this, you've done that. She's like, let's do a lit let's not leave all of that out. Let's not let the trauma take all of that away. Let's not let your darkness take all of the light away. And I ended up coming up with what I thought was a really lovely epilogue that talks about darkness and light. And it does allow me to come to the fact that yeah, there's still pain, but there's good stuff too. And that's important communally because people like a happy story, but it's also important for us because, I mean, as Christian writers, I mean, that's kind of the core of our being, that someday everything will be redeemed. Maybe not in the way we expect, maybe not in the way we want, maybe not in the timeline we want, maybe not in this lifetime, but redemption will come. And so we can't just let that fall off the table. Okay, next slide. And then the last thing is, along with remembering the good stuff, is to free yourself from the need to wrap it all up at the end. I have been reading a lot of Lamentations lately, and I decided that I was going to write a lament in the style of the Book of Lamentations. And what bothered me about it was, well, first of all, I found it very difficult. And I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with the Book of Lamentations, but I mean, there's a lot of yelling at God, a lot of blaming of God going on. And so I wrote about school shootings, and I wrote it in the style of Lamentations, and I railed at God, which was really difficult for me. But then at the end, if you follow the structure of Lamentations, you're saying, "But praise God, that's all." And I got to the end, and I just didn't feel like that. I just didn't feel like I had any kind of result. So while I ended with, yes, God is with me, I choose to still believe, and I choose to hold the tension, and I choose to understand that pain and joy coexist, and that your trauma is a scar that won't ever go away. But it's not all encompassing. There's ways, there's paths to joy. And so I think that that's an important part for us individually, is trying to live a life that's not totally encompassed by our trauma when the triggers are all around us. But I think it's also a really important reminder that we can give the world, that together we can find some little ray of light, even among all the scars that we continue to get every day. So let's move on to the next slide. So I think that is it. And I would love to talk about this further. I feel like I just spewed a lot of stuff at you all, but love to talk about it further and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was really a thoughtful and helpful, I think, remarks. So everyone, we're going to now open it up for questions and discussion. As I mentioned, for those of you who joined late, we're recording this, and so we're gonna record for another 20 minutes or so, and then we'll turn off the recording for about 10 minutes if there's questions or comments people want to make off the recording. But I just want to, there's one quick question in the chat. Was Jenny asked about, could you repeat the author's name who had the Sonder
Oh,
word?
yes. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. It's John, I believe it's pronounced Koenig. It's Koenig. And the name of the book is Dictionary of Obscure Terms. And literally every word in there is wild and wise and beautiful. So I'm going to try to make it my mission to make them mainstream. And I'm going to start with Sonder because that was one of the easier ones.
Yes, nice. And also Toby, and maybe Toby, if you want to come off and say more about this, but Toby put in the chat, Gaber Mate says trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. And I think that's very much in line with what you were describing earlier. Maybe I'll start us off with the first question, and then if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand if you want to come off mute, which I strongly, encourage folks to do so we can have a discussion, or you can put it in the chat if you feel more comfortable. Um, I think for me, that one question or thought I was having as you were talking, Kate, was about the timing, and when is the right time? And I mean, I know that's clearly a issue of discernment, of like when is the right time. But I've had a trauma in my life which I clearly feel like it's way too soon to write about. And so I'm just curious if you can say anything about timing, especially given that you're in this class that's maybe pushing you to write at a different timeline than you would otherwise.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I found through my writing that it's such a it's such a holy work for me. I really feel like, and I'd be curious to know how many of the rest of you feel like this. I really feel like I get these that God gives me these nudges. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful line, or oh, that's a beautiful, and of course I always think, oh, I'll remember that in the morning, and then I never do. Um, but I do think that that's important. And I've written over some traumatic events that have happened in my life, and some traumatic feelings that I couldn't even identify where they were coming from. And I've written them in bits and pieces kind of throughout my life. And then it would just be too much and I'd put it away. Or I'd just write one sentence and I'd put it away. And I just think you never know when you're ready. I started writing this book because it was just, I couldn't not write it. I started writing it in July and I had completed it by October. So I think that it's really something that you can't measure and you can't know. You can just try to write. And if you're finding it helpful and if the words are flowing, then it's time. Maybe not necessarily to share it, but it's time for you to write it. And if it's not helpful and it's not coming out, then, you know, I would just move on to something else, because you can't really rush it.
Thanks for that. Paul, do you want to come off mute and say something?
I think I'm off mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got
Okay,
you.
yeah. Yeah, two thoughts. One is that you talked about trauma as an emotional response, but it seems to me that deeper than an emotional response is actually what actually is physically going on, this physical sensation in our body, and the emotion is on top of that. It's a response to that. And then the thought is a response to the emotion, so it starts from sensation and goes to emotion, then goes to thought. And so to me, it's like, how do I stay with the, with that, grief or trauma or whatever that is? How do I stay with the actual physical feeling of that long enough for that to really be absorbed in some way? And so that's one thought. The other thought was, I love the story of Jacob in the Bible. He sends the Israelites across the river, and he sleeps, on the near bank of the river. And in the middle of the night, this dark figure comes, and they wrestle all night. And my brother used to wrestle in school, like 3 minutes, and you're exhausted. So wrestling all night, right? And then just as the dawn, I mean, everybody knows this story, I'm sure, but just as the black is turning to blue, this figure says, "Let me go," because dawn is breaking. And then you think of all the things that Jacob could have said, "Oh God, I'm not going to have to suffer anymore," or "Get out of here," or "I won," or "Woo," or whatever. And no, he doesn't. He says, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Right? Words that should be written over every therapist's door, it seems to me, right? And it seems to me that there's some really important thing about trauma there that it's like there's a Buddhist prayer where they say, "May I have the right amount of suffering," and because when we stay with it in faith, it really just stay present to it. There's something there's sometimes a white dot in the middle of that black comma that really, really matters. I've felt that over and over again with multiple traumas in my own life. And so I would just say, how do we be faithful to the trauma as well as, and not just try and escape it? Because if you try to escape it, you're just running out of fear. Thanks.
That's a big question, and I will say I'm not a therapist. I don't have any kind of a counseling or mental health degree. I can only speak from my personal experience, and that's what I have found to be the most meaningful, and what people have really suggested is very meaningful that have talked to about this is to what is your entry point, and so if you stay with the places where you entered, the activities, the physical things where you entered into the traumatic response, be it thoughts, feelings, physical, emotional, then those will keep churning in you and they will be working in you. And then other people can get that same, they can see that emotion in you, but you got there through your own story. Which is why it's so important to start with your own story. I think you get there without even realizing that you're there, if that makes sense. But it's hard to get there through telling of somebody else's story, or through trying to be vague about what you were feeling or thinking or seeing without being really specific about the event that caused that feeling. It's kind of an undressing when you start with the event, I think. And then your second point about Jacob and the blessing, I just wanted to share this. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with Sharon Brous, and she just wrote a book called The Amen Effect. Have any of you all heard that? It is an absolutely wonderful, Sharon Brous, she's a rabbi, Brous, and it's called The Amen Effect. And it's really beautiful. But one of the opening stories that she tells is this Jewish tradition that they have where they go kind of on pilgrimage and they walk in a circle, and you enter it's almost like a labyrinth. You enter the circle and you walk around to the right and you say your prayers. But if you have suffered or you are in pain, or you feel like you need forgiveness for something, you can walk to the left. And as you meet people, you say to those people coming from the left, the people on the right would stop and say in Hebrew, "What is your pain?" And bless your pain. And they would say, "I hurt here," or "I feel this," or "I'm sorry for something I've done." And then they say, "Bless your pain," and they move on. And I think that's just a beautiful thing that we can do for each other.
Thanks, Kate. Let's go with Toby, and then there's a couple questions from the chat we can get to.
I'm curious if you have stories or experience of watching your students heal trauma through writing.
That's so interesting. I have watched, so we started with pre-K and the school is now at the 5th grade. So they're not prolific writers yet, but I will say that I have watched them heal their trauma through relationship, through friendship, through drawing, and through storytelling with each other. I've found that to be really a special place for them. Just being in a community where they felt loved and respected, they felt more at ease to kind of talk about things. And it was a beautiful thing to watch children and families and adults start to, kind of let their shoulders down and feel like they were in a safe space. And I think that's the first step, probably. Mm-hmm. Although, it's a trauma that they got to go back to wherever they're going to sleep for the night or whatever they're going to find to eat. So it never goes away. And I'll share, there's one story, and I told this story in the book about a mother who had really a very difficult life. She had 2 sons, and the father was in and out. When he needed stuff, he would show up. Otherwise, he was out. She was just always scrounging around to figure out where are we going to sleep? What are we going to eat? All that. But she called Monday Miracle Monday. And every Monday she would come in and she would say, "It's Miracle Monday. Everybody smile." And on Tuesday, I would say, "Well, what was your what was your miracle yesterday? And most of the times it was something like, I woke up, or we found some cereal for breakfast. I mean, it wasn't like some groundbreaking, earth-shattering thing, but it inspired me and it healed me some to just grasp on to her joy of just looking for the miracles. So.
Mhm.
Thanks, Kobe. Let's pivot back to, this may have been addressed because I know you said a little bit more. You talked a little bit about it already more, but Nanette asked in the chat if you could say more about the idea of your unique entry point. And I think that's, I had a similar question, which is like, do you mean sort of an experiential entry point, similar to what we were talking about the sort of somatic kind of entry point, or do you mean like in the publishing marketplace? That's one thing that I think, that I do think there is a real challenge. Writing for your life, we think about both sides of the coin. We think about the writing and we support one another and learn from industry experts about publishing. And one thing that I've heard a lot as a published author and in the, being in the space is publishers are not interested in, necessarily, and this is hard, another cancer book. And so I think my question to you, and this may not have been what Nanette was asking, but what can you say more about what you mean about the entry point idea, and does it link at all to sort of thinking about the publishing marketplace, so to speak? Thanks.
Yeah, I think so. I can use an example from actually I'll use an example from the lamentation that I wrote recently because it was really interesting. I wanted to write about school shootings, but I was trying to follow the structure of the Book of Lamentations. And we don't really hear the exact thing that happened in there. And so I wrote very nebulously, like you might not even know that I was writing about school shootings. And I had somebody read it and they said, what does that have to do with you? Why do you care? Why do you care? And so that was my unique entry point. And it turned out that what I was able to add to that is I've never been the victim of a school shooting, but my daughter said to me one day, here I go to school, she's in high school, the scariest place on earth. And they have active shooter drills at their school where the SWAT team comes in and they lay on the floor and so that was my unique entry point. And by introducing those really concrete facts that were facts in my life, I was able to describe and elicit emotions that came across on the page that didn't necessarily come across if I had just tried to kind of describe the emotion without the actual thing that happened, if that makes sense. So they can be very small, but I think just connecting it back to yourself. Why do I care about this? And the publishing world is a whole different thing. That's why I said, write it down, write the story you want to write from the place you want to write it, and then have somebody back it up or bring it forward. And that could be your publisher saying, that's great and all, but for the published work, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But at least you've started, with your truth. So does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth, do you have a question or a comment?
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm glad I came listen to this session on trauma, because that's one of those things that nobody likes to talk about, although they're probably dealing with it. And I wrote a comment that it's like a bruise or wound, that if you don't clean it up, it's going to get infected. And if you don't deal with the trauma that's in you, however small or big it is, because we've had small cuts that turned into big infections because they weren't treated. And so with trauma, I see that as the same thing. If you're not talking about it, or if you're not dealing with it, whether you write about it as a writer or find a way to, in a healthy way, talk about it so that it doesn't become an infected sore. So I I'm just glad that I joined this, because trauma is not easy, but it's still part of life. And so it still has to be dealt with in some kind of way. And I did a paper some years ago when I was taking a course and we were doing a World War II. And so I chose to write about comfort women. I wanted something difficult because I was teaching Sunday school at the time. And so I wanted to be comfortable dealing with uncomfortable issues. And so that was a helpful thing for me to do that. So I'm glad I was a part of this. And thank you so much for your comments and everything.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I just want to see if Jenny wants to jump in. She's made a couple comments, and including one about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So Jenny, I don't want to put you on but I know Jenny's a physician, and so I do think the whole point of, thinking about the physicality of trauma.
Yeah,
And,
thank you. So much. I also heard your interview, Kate Kennedy, I'm talking to right now with Kate. Previously, I really appreciate what you're sharing today as well as previously.
Thank you.
I'm a big talker, so I don't want to, that's why I haven't offered to speak. But yes, The Body Keeps the Score. Many of you might know that. And Gabor Mate is also a physician. He's not the one who wrote that, but he also writes about this idea of the embodiment of our experiences. So many times we act as if we are really just cut off from the chin up, and we're really just brains, and we're talkers, we're writers, we're thinkers, we're debaters, but we are embodied, and that is such a Christian idea. So for those of you who are Christians on this, and even spiritual idea, really embodiment. So I do love that book, and you can look at how trauma is embodied. And also from Mate, from his writings. And then I just wanted to thank you, Kate, for being an advocate for the guns. And it's the leading cause of death in children. That's why. And I thought, okay, I'm speaking from my entry point, which is I'm a pediatrician, and I'm a public health pediatrician. And I'm aghast that the country that I give tax money to and support and am from, that as hard as I fight disease, that the leading killer of children in my country is guns. And they're not coming into my clinic to get rid of their guns. That's not why they come. It's a different problem. So I guess that's my entry point. That's all. And I would be interested, Kate Kennedy, how you got your publisher or your agent, or what process you went through there.
So yeah, that's interesting because Kate and I talked about, should I talk about that some tonight? And my friend Kathy Izzard, who many of you all probably know, she actually does a webinar on it. So I don't want to steal any of her material, but I will say that I went the independent publishing route. Publishing is hard these days, and it was interesting. I had several publishers that were really interested in the manuscript, and they said we would do it, but your social media following isn't big enough. And I was like, but I thought that was the point. Well, it's apparently not the point. They want you to come with the whole package deal. And I didn't have that yet. But there are a lot of perks to independent publishing, and the world of independent publishing has definitely changed. So I want to figure out a way where I can not feel like I'm ripping off my friend Kathy, but also sharing what I learned from the process. But anybody who's interested in independent publishing, I'd be happy to talk with you privately. And I also would say Ingram Spark is the way to go. It is an independent publishing house and printer, and it's the way to go. Bookstores really respect you when you go in with your Ingram Spark.
Can you type that in the chat? And sorry to cut you off, Kate Kennedy.
No.
That's one thing that I'm really pleased about Kate's experience, is that independent bookstores are what's the word? Selling her book. And
Yes.
that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case even just a couple years ago. The main drawback of self-publishing or independent publishing was that independent bookstores wouldn't carry your book. So you might want to check out, and we have a number of Writing for Your Life folks who've had really good experiences with self-publishing recently. And so I do think maybe even like a panel, we could,
Yes.
we could dive into that more.
Yeah, because I mean, Kathy taught me a lot, but then I learned a lot on my own. And it's amazing. It wasn't a hard process if you follow the steps. And I would go into bookstores with my book and I'd say, and they'd say, oh, well, does how many spelling errors do you think it has? Have you had it proofread? Is a book bound or stapled? I was like, stapled? Who people do that? And so I think I had a cover designer. I mean, I have an actual real book. Like it's really a real book. It's even has a barcode on the back. So the independent booksellers are very happy to have it. And I own the story still.
Sorry to cut you off. I just was going to say, I think this is directly relevant to our topic about trauma, because as I said, depending if you want to write or if you are writing or plan to write on a trauma, and it's a possibility that you might get pushback from a publisher. And again, unfortunately, the cancer is an example that comes up, that people want to write their cancer stories, and it's hard to not always. But so if you did have a trauma that you wanted to write about and you felt that a traditional publisher might not be interested, independent publishing could be absolutely a wonderful path. And as Kate Kennedy has spoken to, and a lot of our friends and colleagues, there's just increasingly amazing opportunities for self-publishing. Speaking of which, I'm going to give a shout out, and again, it relates to the topic, topic broadly. As I've been thinking about trauma and writing trauma, I've been thinking about using different genre, including poetry or perhaps even comedy. And I want to give a shout out to our friend and colleague who's on the line, author Refried Bean. We just did a interview with Refried Bean this week. I'll put the recording in, and she's Refried Bean. I don't want to put you on the spot or make you speak, but it's very versatile in terms of using a lot of different genres. So that was just one thought I had too, as we're talking about writing trauma and Kate Kennedy, your example of writing a prayer of lamentations, I think is such an amazing example. So I just wanted to give that shout out.
Kate, can I tell the other Kate something?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Okay, I went to social work school, and one of the topics that I found helpful was called disenfranchised grief. And I don't know if you've ever heard about that, but it's like stuff people go through that doesn't get the care and sympathy. And I like your book because it's a unique loss. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think disenfranchised grief is something that I think that somebody could write many whole beautiful books on that. I was just talking to somebody about that today because, when we were going through COVID, and we did this a lot, but COVID's just a great example. Like you put your head down and we just had to get through it. You think back on it now and you're like, did that really happen? Well, so now that we're done, and this happens all the time, when we're kind of moved, past that and are sort of resuming normal life, is when the trauma and the chaos, the internal chaos is catching up with you. But you think, well, it's all normal now. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like that? And we say that to each other. Move on. We're moving on. But it's very disenfranchised. But it came from something. It just doesn't keep the same timeline. The events and the emotions. So it can get really confusing, I think.
Sorry, Kate, can you just define or summarize because I'm not familiar with that phrase.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's when you have trauma and you can't identify the source. Is that what you were speaking to? Right. You can't identify the source of your trauma. You just have these feelings of grief and darkness and loss, and you can't identify where it's coming from. And sometimes it's coming from just an institutional situation or system in our world that everybody just takes for granted, that really causes you as a person to feel bad about yourself. But you don't identify it because it's just so pervasive, or it already ended. So you just walk around with this trauma that you don't know what to do with.
Thank you. I know Jenny wants to jump back in.
Super
And then we're gonna
quickly,
have a
two
few minutes
things.
off
One
video.
is that kind of grief is often part of moral injury. So if you look up moral injury, used to be something that we thought about with vets after war, where they had to shoot at a child or they had to kill somebody that they didn't think they should be killing or whatever. They had to do things that were horrible, right? So it went against everything that the ethic when they joined as a soldier that they were taught, and it went totally against what they thought they were doing, but they felt that they had no control, no power over it. Many healthcare workers have experienced moral injury. We did in COVID, but we have many times when we're part of this industrial medical complex that wants you to see people in 15 minutes. And you've got somebody crying in front of you and you're like, sorry, oh man, I feel for you. I'm so sorry our visit's so short. But that's a moral injury because it goes totally against the code of what we were taught to do. It's against our ethic. And I'm going to try to be super quick on that. So look up moral injury because that's part of your trauma, right? A lot of times your trauma is that you morally were going in this direction and other forces caused you to have to turn from that and go in a direction that it morally isn't where you wanted to go. Grief walking is like what you talked about with the Jewish practice. And I just encourage you all to look up that because again, it's embodied practice of getting out trauma. And it's a spectacular, beautiful practice. And all of you could do it with a group of 5 people. And it's amazing. So I won't say more than that. But again, it's embodied. It's an embodied way of dealing with trauma.
Jenny, and for those who
And
don't
I
know,
believe
Jenny's
it will help your writing.
That sounds great. Jenny's the co-author of a book called Designed to Heal, which I think is also very relevant to this whole discussion. So, well, I just want to thank everyone for this conversation. And of course, thank Kate Kennedy for her incredible facilitation and presentation. We're going to turn off the recording, but we're going to stay on for about 5 or 7 more minutes for anyone who wants to ask anything in addition. But for now, just thank you, Kate. That we'll make this recording probably, up on the YouTube channel for Writing for Your Life, and just really appreciate your thoughts and your time and you sharing your wisdom with us. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I've seen lots of kind words about my book in the chat, and I haven't gone over it, but I just want to say thank you all. I see them all, and I really appreciate it. And thank you, Kate, for the opportunity to be here. And I'll just share one thing. It's sort of self for myself, but also just learning for you all. There is a website, bookshop.org. Are you all familiar with that? And my book is on bookshop.org. And if you want it and you order it from bookshop.org, you can pick which independent bookstore in your city or anywhere that you want the proceeds to go to. They're a nonprofit and they support independent bookstores. So I just think that's a really cool thing.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, such a fun thing to be with you on your book launch day, your book birthday. So thank you again for making time for this on that.
Thank you.
So I will pause the recording now. Thanks again.